Welcome to Consumer Counterpoint, your video cast that talks about consumer issues, class actions, other litigation-related issues. I'm Christine Argentine, your host, one of your hosts, partner in Chicago's Cypress Chicago office.
And I'm Paul Yvonik, also a partner in the Chicago office and co-host as well.
Yeah. So today we're talking about the Texas Mini-TCPA again.
Yep.
We've talked about it before, but in a slightly different light. So if you've seen our previous episode, last time we talked about the amendments that went into place in September of 2025.
Right.
And those amendments, were similar to some of the amendments we've been seeing across the country in different states, most significantly of which added text messages as kind of within the definition of telephone solicitation.
Right. And obviously at the time there was a lot of questions, looming of, its applicability and interpretations, and, no surprise. There's been a lot that has happened since September, including lawsuits and, parties seeking interpretations and getting the state involved.
Yeah. And so one of the amendments related to a registration requirement and how any business that is operating within the state of Texas or
into the state of Texas.
That's right, has to register with the state of Texas as a telemarketer if you're making telephone solicitations. And so if you combine that registration requirement with the text message expansion, now you've got all these companies, national in scope, who are sending text messages nationally, who are suddenly questioning whether or not they need to register.
Right. And obviously, the registration, as we know, and we'll discuss a little bit more, was not just simply, providing just a little bit of information to the state.
Right.
And it was just left some questions still desired to be answered.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of what those registration requirements were that kind of were causing a little bit of anxiety, I'll say, with different businesses. So there was a filing fee standard. Most states require a filing fee. It was $200. That wasn't the big issue. There was a $10,000 it still is there.
Yeah.
There is a $10,000 bond that has to get posted. And the point of that bond is that if, it's determined that an entity or a company is violating the statute in some way, there's a chunk of money there to give to injured parties.
I mean, $10,000, it's a lot to put up for a bond, but I've never seen a TCPA case settle for anywhere close to $10,000.
No.
So it's almost like...
No.
Okay. I mean, it's a headache nonetheless. But...
Yeah. And it's something that I think a lot of companies were resisting.
Sure.
Right? But I think the biggest part of the registration requirement, the most onerous part of the registration requirement, was what information about the company had to be submitted.
Right.
And so there's, if you go to the statute, which is Chapter 302 of the Texas Business Commerce Code, there's a whole list of what needs to be submitted. But I think some of the more significant stuff was sales information.
Right.
Financial information. And you could see why companies don't want to submit that as part of a registration.
Yeah, why would you want to submit something to the state you wouldn't even want your competitors to have, and now the state has it? I mean, it's just very invasive.
Right. And so we, at the time, September and on, we got a lot of phone calls from different clients saying, do I have to register? Right? Do I have to follow all these requirements in order to continue marketing?
Do I have to register? Do I really have to give up my sales data, my financial information? I mean, we were talking about it before. I mean, some of this stuff may be subject to a FOIA request and not something that our clients want out there.
Right. And so, I think it's important to note that there are a lot of exemptions under the statute of, hey, if you fall into one of these categories, you don't have to register. I would say the categories are less than clear, right? You have these really broad categories. So, for instance, persons that are, or entities that are regulated by some other law, right?
Yeah.
Regulated by the SEC, because you're a publicly traded company, regulated by the insurance industry, public utility.
I mean, you just got to wonder, because of how broad it is, OSHA, EPA, whatever it might be, if I'm regulated by any of those, I mean, almost every business has some sort of regulation.
And so there was a real question there of do I fit in this? Do I not fit in this?
Right.
So there was a lot of uncertainty there, right? Educational nonprofit organizations, that's a little bit easier, but what does educational mean? right? We could see that getting expanded differently.
Right. I mean, obviously, public schools, universities. I mean, it applies to that. But then, okay, so daycare, learning systems and centers.
Right. Retailers
Maybe.
that focus on educational.
Sure.
Who knows, right? So, if you're soliciting food sales, you're exempt.
Okay.
So that obviously could expand out quite far if you're only soliciting former or current customers.
Right.
So I think there's, if you operated a retail establishment for 2 years, if a majority of the business is done in person.
So now there's an analysis of
Right.
what's done in person, e-commerce, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So of course, right, people want to fit within the exemptions. It's unclear if you do or not. And it's new amendments to the statute. So people are taking a risk, making a decision that we don't have to register because we fit with an exemption. And so it was causing a lot of issues.
Sure.
And so what we then saw, right, and then I guess I should say, if you don't fit within one of those exemptions, right, you can't make telephone solicitations, text messages into the state of Texas or from the state of Texas without registering.
Sure.
Without following all of the requirements. And so what we saw a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality specifically of the registration requirements.
Exactly.
And that lawsuit actually very much focused on consent-based programs.
Right. Right. And they filed that lawsuit, I think, right at the beginning of September. I mean, right when it was going to be implemented, and it was like, well, wait a minute, this is not clear at all, and this is unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, the crux of the argument was we've got companies intentionally collecting consent from users in the state of Texas and everywhere, and they are saying, we want to get your marketing, right? We're signing up for your marketing, but now this statute is telling companies, but you still can't do that unless you follow all these other requirements.
Right. I already have consent, and you want me to jump through more hoops, put up a bond, give you financial information, all of this stuff, for something I already have permission to do.
Right. Right. And so that case ultimately settled. And what the Texas Attorney General did was that they basically publicly stated, and it's on their website, that this didn't apply to consent-based texts, right? Companies that have a consent-based database from which they send text messages to do not have to register.
Right.
And what was interesting is that it actually went on, this Texas Secretary of the State website has kind of this in their frequently asked questions, and it went on to say, and in fact, if you are a company that has a consent-based database from which you send text messages to, and that includes Texas residents, you can withdraw your registration because presumably a lot of people submitted registrations.
Right.
Texas is a big state. That's a lot of consumers that companies weren't necessarily willing to exclude from their marketing, and also didn't want to take the risk of being found, in violation of the statute.
Right, right. And it's interesting because you can withdraw your application or your submission, but what happens with that information, I guess is what I would want to know if I'm a business, and I would want Texas, the AG's office to answer that as well.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, right, is that with the amendments was a kind of, I wouldn't say new private right of action, but an easier path to a private right of action. And so technically, the Texas's AG's statements are not binding, right? And if you are in violation of the registration requirements, could that be a cause of action under a lawsuit, under a private lawsuit? Now, do I think that's a really strong argument? Not really anymore.
No.
But it doesn't mean it's not an argument that could be made.
Right. It's just the AG's office talking about enforcement from their perspective, but doesn't mean that a plaintiff cannot come with a private right of action and say, well, I don't see where the law says that.
Right. I think you're violating by not being registered.
Right.
And so this is part of my cause of action.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
could you turn around and, say, well, a court has clarified this, and then as a result, the AG's office, put out a statement, and so, it can be persuasive,
Right.
on this type of private right of action, but there's no guarantee.
Right. And really, it was a settlement, right? So it's not even a court order that you can kind of wave around. So, we thought it was worth updating on this particular thing, this particular piece, this registration piece, but I think there'll be more to come. I think the statute,
Well, I think we're going to see this again in a
out.
private right of action and a
Right.
lawsuit not against the state of Texas. And so just to see, like, how is all of this, what played out here, how does this apply there?
Right.
That's probably going to be the next move.
Yeah, and I think we haven't really seen the private right of action in
Right.
action yet,
Right.
Since it just went into place in September. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of litigation in Texas that with this new private right of action and the amendments, the application to text messages, the registration included, that we'll see kind of circulating through the courts.
Yeah, and hopefully the courts kind of take a look at this and say, I'm not going to let the floodgates open, so let's take a look at this now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, hopefully.
Awesome.
So we'll see.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's the update for today.
all right.